Hi everyone, my name is Holly and I took a bullet for this community. Wait, more like a grenade launcher to the face. Where is my Medal of Honor? I should be called the BookTube Savior. Negan would be proud. So for the month of May, I decided to challenge myself to read the lowest rated books that I own. Mistakes were made, boys and girls. Big mistakes. Before we begin, I did do my very first reading for 24 hours, readathon, vlog, doohickey thing for some of these books, and I will link that down below for you in the description box if you want more detail on my misery. Also, go ahead and subscribe to this channel, and while you're down there, just gently caress that like button for me if you enjoy this content. Now, onto the books. So the very first book that I picked up this month wasn't part of the TBR challenge, but it was definitely mandatory, and that was A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas. Now, this is a novella for the A Court in Thorns and Roses series, and I'm sure you've heard about it everywhere, so I'll kind of keep this short, but it's basically a kind of nice emotional wrap up for our characters after the events of ACOWAR, and it's also a start to a new beginning for the spin-off series, and I think it did that specifically pretty well. This book doesn't really have a storyline at all. It's centered around the inner circle while they kind of prepare and celebrate for the winter solstice. I originally gave this book 4 stars when I read it on the day it was released, but after realizing that I had way more problems with it than I initially thought, I lowered it to 3 stars, and here's my reason why. One being, this book is not a fantasy. It's a contemporary. And you guys know how I feel about my contemporaries. It was full of fluff and cringy dialogue, and I didn't really like Rhysand all that much in this book. He acted like a horny 15-year-old boy, and Feyre was wearing Uggs. Also, the sex scene that involved like traveling through space was a bit weird, or maybe I'm just boring and not exotic. We're getting a bit personal here. I did really enjoy Feyre's scenes of when she's working on her paintings and when she's building up that art studio. I really enjoyed those personally, and I will be brave and say that I totally ship Cassian with that girl that he meets at that clothing shop, and I pray to the ACOTAR heavens that ends up being a thing in the spin-off series, because I really don't like Nesta. I've never shipped Nesta and Cassian, but that girl in that clothing shop, man, she's a babe. But yeah, I'm sure you've heard many reviews on this, so I will end it here. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. So let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room, because I did DNF one of the books that was on my TBR for the month, but it's no surprise because it was the lowest rated book that I own, and that was Given to the Sea by Mindy McGinnis. This was really not good. It was Garbo. Poo. It's kind of the equivalent of those annoying little pimples you get under your nose. I only got about 107 pages into this. It's about a girl named Kosa who's meant to be sacrificed to the sea, but then she goes to a kingdom to try and find a guy that she can tolerate touching so that she can get pregnant. I'm gonna be honest, the writing was a hot mess, and there were absolutely no character development. You're introduced to so many characters, and they're just kind of like thrown at you with no real personality to them, and I agree with its low rating, and I'm not gonna rate it personally, but I ended up DNFing. So up next on my TBR was Wink Poppy Midnight by April Tchulk, and this one was kind of a ride. I am going to try my hardest to explain what this book is about to you. There's gonna be a lot of pointing to the cover. So Poppy is a spoiled, cruel brat of a girl who kind of drags everyone along within a romance, but mainly Midnight. Midnight is her neighbor, and he's in love with her until he moves and decides to break off their really messed up friendship and moves next door to Wink, a girl with lots of siblings and doesn't care about anyone else's opinions. Midnight then in turns falls for Wink which then leads into a really strange and weird love triangle. And then a bunch of other confusing stuff happens. The first 10% of this, I was like, okay, it's not terrible. It's not as bad as what everyone was telling me. But then it took a nosedive. Midnight was absolutely clueless, and that bothered the hell out of me. Poppy was a brat, and don't even get me started with our girl Wink here. Bland as fork. The writing was really poetic at times, which I really enjoyed, but I couldn't really take it seriously most of the time. I ended up giving this one 2 out of 5 stars. Strike 3. So the next book I picked up was The Scroll of Years by Chris Willerich. So in this story we follow Bone and a very pregnant Gaunt, and they are a kind of a western thieving couple who have drawn the attention of a really scary, shadowy magician society who are able to predict your next move, and a slave dragon. That's right, a slave dragon. They are chased into the Far East, which I think the reader is supposed to assume China, where they meet new characters and new alliances. It was a really refreshing change reading about a couple on the run, and it totally reminded me of Saga, with a couple being chased after a society that is trying to kill the child. There is a lot of action and fight scenes in this, and also there's dragons, which were really fun to see. But while reading this, I started to realize that there was just something off. Something seemed off about the story, and I think it's the author's writing style. The words will be really lyrical and beautiful during one sentence, and then all of a sudden one of the characters will say some cheesy one-liner and totally ruin it. And the romance between the two characters were definitely a bit cringy at times. This is also a pretty large series, but I don't think I will be continuing it, unfortunately. And after letting the story kind of sink into my brain for a little while, I ended up giving this one 2.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I picked up was Nightfall by Jake Halpern and Peter Kujawinsky. So I actually have a full video review for this book specifically on my channel, and I will link that down below for you if you want a more in-depth review on this, so I'll keep this one a bit short. But basically this book is about an island that succumbs to 14 years of day and then 14 years of night. And the story begins when the entire island is packing up all of their things because the night cycle is about to begin. But an unfortunate series of events lead to a small group of kids, our main characters. They end up getting left on the island, and they have to try and survive this very icy, cold, and dark island all by themselves and try to figure out a way to get off of it. And they have to try and do this very quickly because things are starting to awaken and creep within the darkness and it's kind of creepy, but it's not terrifying whatsoever. This book is definitely more suspense and mystery than horror. The world that was created is just overall satisfying to read about and incredibly interesting as well. I enjoyed the whole aspect of it. I just really wish that more of the mysteries were solved by the end of the book, because it really left me hanging with a lot of unanswered questions, and also the ending is a little bit rushed, and that's the only thing that I did not like about this book, but probably 80% of it was flawless to me. I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I was very pleasantly surprised. So by this time of the month, I took a good look at the books I had left on my TBR, and I was really not in the mood for them. So I decided to pick up something differently that also had mixed reviews, and that was Reign of Shadows by Sophie Jordan. And it's really funny that I picked up this book because I had no idea that the story involved the world being plunged into darkness like Nightfall was. So I literally read 2 books in a row that had that aspect, and I thought that was really funny. So Reign of Shadows is set in a world where it's completely plunged into darkness because of a total eclipse of the heart that took place 17 years ago. And with the eclipse came the rise of these dark, disgusting creatures that roam the lands and basically kill people. So we follow Luna, who is the lost princess who was whisked away from her castle 17 years ago after the assassination of her parents. So Luna is kept safe inside of this tower with her loyal guard and her wet nurse, and this tower is like in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and she is the true queen of this kingdom. So yes, this totally gave me Rapunzel vibes. While I enjoyed the world that Sophie Jordan created, which was so cool, I love the lore about it, the romance totally killed it for me. Actually, specifically, Luna killed it for me. So here are all of my complaints. The story is very inconsistent. There's actually a sentence in here that our main character Luna says, and that is that she was taught to assess her surroundings and to never rush into things. But there's a scene in this book where she actually has to be held down to the ground so that she doesn't go rushing to this tower that is infiltrated by soldiers. And there's another scene where they see a cottage and her companion says, wait, we can't just waltz in there, and Luna actually huffs in frustration and runs to the cottage and bursts open the door to go inside. You obviously weren't taught very well. Also, Luna is very dumb. She is the lost princess and she knows this. So she has the nerve to actually ask,
why does the new king want to kill girls between the ages of 15 and 20?
Why do you think? It's like putting a 4-piece puzzle together. You can do it. Also, she is very bad at decision making. She has been protected inside of this tower so that her heritage isn't found out. But once she gets out and is on her own, she decides to go,
I feel like surrendering today.
She also has this really annoying mentality of, I am a woman and I will not be ordered around, which is totally okay, but not in dangerous situations that are going to get her killed. You should listen to someone if you're in danger, and she just doesn't. Like, you'd rather die instead of taking an order to hide. This isn't feminism, this is pure stupidity. I ended up giving this one 2.75 out of 5 stars. And I went on to the next one. I probably should have warned you guys that this wrap-up was going to be really brutal. So I picked up Rise of Fire by Sophie Jordan. This is the second book to that book that I just showed you, and I DNF'd it. I think Luna's personality was even worse in this book. She just has this really painfully annoying mentality, and I just couldn't finish it, so I DNF'd it. So at this point, I started to feel that very evil reading slump growing within me. So when this happens, I pick up a graphic novel, and I did that. I picked up Wires and Nerves by Marissa Meyer Volume 1. I'm so happy I picked this one up because it literally felt like a big warm hug after a very long day. It was every feeling of comfort and contentness that I desperately needed this month. So this graphic novel takes place a few months after the ending of the Lunar Chronicles, and Levana's army of wolf soldiers are causing some major trouble on Earth. They are killing and terrifying humans, and Iko has decided that she is just the right person to track them all down and bring them back up to Luna for interrogation. I absolutely love that we got to see so much of Iko, who despite being an android has never acted robotic. I love her loyalty to her friends, and also how she has so much feeling and emotion, which isn't something that you normally see in an android. We get to see Scarlet and Wolf, Cress and Thorn, Cinder and Kai. The whole gang has cameos, and it just felt so heartwarming. But yes, there is a but. I did find the plot to get just a little bit boring at times. The blurb promises Iko hunting down these wolves, but we actually don't really get to see too much of that. I also don't really care for the antagonist in this story. I find it hard to believe his motives. I still ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars though, and I need that second volume. So I still wasn't in the mood to pick up any of the books on my TBR, so I decided to pick up The Curious Charms of Arthur Pepper by Phaedra Patrick. I have no idea why I was in the mood for this. I just saw it on my shelf and was like, yep, you're the one. So as the title hints at, this book is all about Arthur Pepper, who is a 69-year-old man living by himself. His wife has unfortunately died, and he's struggling with his day-to-day life, having to cope with his loss. His grown-up children have finally pushed him to go through his wife's things, to either throw away or to give to charity, and he's obviously very reluctant to do this, but he eventually gives in. As he's going through her things, he ends up finding a heart-shaped box that he has never seen before, and when he opens it, he finds a very nicely made, ornate looking bracelet with charms on it, and one of them specifically being an elephant that has like an Indian design on it, and also a phone number on the back. And this kind of leads into the rest of the novel as Arthur investigates this possibly mysterious and adventurous part of his wife's life that he has never been told about. This book totally took me by surprise, and I'm really happy that I picked it up on a whim. I immediately felt devoted to this man's life, and I desperately needed to know his story. This book is so charming. I mean, charm, it's in the title, so you kind of expect it to be, but maybe a little bit too much. And I only say this because Arthur runs into a lot of strangers on his adventures to like Paris and London, complete strangers who actually offer him a place to stay. Like, they haven't even known each other for a couple hours, and he ends up going to all of these strangers' homes and staying the night, which I don't find to be very realistic. And the plot did get a little bit repetitive as he's going through each charm and finding out the story behind all of them. It was really interesting to read about, but again, it got just a little bit repetitive. Also, every single millennial that Arthur met was super exaggerated, and I could tell that the author was trying to make huge contrasted differences between this old man and the young people he was meeting, which absolutely wasn't necessary. I ended up giving this one 3.25 out of 5 stars. If you like British charm, I would highly recommend this one. It is set in the UK, so it is full of it. Holy smokes, seeing all the books that I read, or at least attempted to read, all together, I read quite a bit this month. So there was only a couple days left in May, and I really wanted to somehow squeeze another book into this wrap up. So I decided to pick up The Mortal Instruments, the graphic novel edition by Cassandra Clare and the art by Cassandra Jean. Now, I love the Mortal Instruments series, the book version, but this was definitely a miss for me. My biggest problem with this is the artwork, and that's just a personal opinion. I'm sure a lot of you might read this and absolutely adore the artwork, but for me personally, I just don't think it quite worked. I thought the characters were very unattractive, and it's not at all how I pictured them to look like personally. And I just felt like the story was all over the place. The plot was jumping from one thing to the next, and some of the panels just didn't make sense. There's a panel of Clary getting knocked out, and it was literally just like this black blob coming at her face. I'm like, what in the world is happening? And then the next panel was of her waking up, and I'm like, what? Like, I had to like piece the puzzles together that she was knocked unconscious, and there was a lot of moments similar to that within this graphic novel, and it just didn't set right with me. I ended up giving this one 2 out of 5 stars, and I definitely won't be continuing on with this graphic novel series, unfortunately. So those were all of the books that I read in May. Do I recommend this challenge? Maybe. Only if you have a very strong mindset. I probably won't be doing this again because I had a really bad month. I read a lot of bad books. I found a couple of surprising ones, but it's just mostly really bad. So that is it. Go ahead and follow me on my social media. I am at Holly Hearts Books on Instagram and at Holly Niece on Twitter. And until we meet again, happy reading.